Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Welcome to the talent and leadership stage. What's great about this stage is it's very Q&A based. So we're going to have 30 minutes of the talk and then 15 minutes of Q&A. So there's a great site over here, which is sponsored by EY. You don't have to download an app. You don't have to re-upload anything. Literally just visit that URL. And in there, you can submit questions, and then you can vote up or down any questions, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. Now, I am really excited about the session. Actually, when I was getting a briefing for actually coming and emceeing today, the person who was giving me the briefing said, I'm not allowed to have favorites, but Sarah is my favorite. So I think you've come to the best session of the whole day. And Sarah is literally going to be talking about how to be bold and how to embrace your vulnerabilities. And funnily enough, out there, I said to Sarah, I'm so sorry, I'm going to struggle pronouncing your surname because I'm dyslexic. And I said sorry about 3 times. And she said, no, this is about embracing your vulnerabilities. So I'm going to confess to everyone I'm dyslexic. I love this woman. Please give her a massive round of applause. And let's get the session going.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. So I want to start off by telling you a story about Celia Weiss. Celia grew up in Hungary in the early 1930s, and she was the youngest of 9 children. And there is a story that I had heard about her, where when she was growing up and going to school, she had a real problem where she rarely needed to use the bathroom. And she thought it was kind of weird because at recess they would stop and they would say, okay, kids, please get up and go to the bathroom. And she'd say, I don't need to. And she'd go maybe once a day. Odd story, right? And then she kind of thought something was wrong. Her parents took her to the doctor, and they said, we don't really know what the deal is. And she's like, what's wrong with me? What's my problem here? Anyway, fast forward, Celia's 15 years old, and the Nazis come to her town in Hungary. They take her away, and they take her to Auschwitz. And they put her in the lineup. She gets sent to the good line. And her torture was to literally wake up in the morning, stand up at 8 o'clock in the morning or whenever sunup was, and then stand all day until sundown, and then she would go back to her barracks. Whoever went to the bathroom was shot on sight. Celia's vulnerability saved her life. Celia is now 89 years old. She is my grandmother. When you hear stories that you think it's like you've got the worst deck of cards, you got the worst situation handed to you, and it turns out that it actually can be a phenomenal asset. And amazingly, I only heard this story 2 weeks ago. She just started opening up and telling stories about this vulnerability. Anyway, this story, very dramatic, very traumatic. Mine, not so much. But the idea is the same, because how you perceive yourself is the way other people end up perceiving you. So perception is really a story about perspective. It's particularly applicable in today's world. And so when you look in the mirror and you think to yourself, do I see liabilities or do I see assets? Sometimes we end up looking at ourselves in maybe a bit of a distorted way. And we look at ourselves and we say, am I looking right? And so we look to others and we say, well, I don't look like everybody else. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And in this industry where perception is everything, you kind of want to blend in. But I want to challenge that thinking. Often we sit at a crossroads. Do we fit the mold or do we break the mold? And it's important for us to think about what that mold is in creativity. And that brings us to the story of me. So my parents and my grandparents raised me to fit a mold, just not one that looks like anybody that you'd see here in the Palais. See, I was raised Orthodox Jewish, which means a few different things, but just to give you some context. I grew up in a sea of sameness. We all looked the same. We all lived within 3 miles of each other. We lived in quite an enclave, and that's not me in the blonde hair. That's the one to the right. That would be me. Not my finest hour, but the only one my mom could find. Had a dual curriculum, which meant that whereas most of the kids in America went to schools that started at 9, went to 3, mine started at 8 and went to 6. and then we had twice as much homework. And so it was a little bit, challenging in order to handle that as well. There were a bunch of restrictions that were put on us. So from Friday at sundown until Saturday night, we couldn't do anything. We couldn't watch TV, we couldn't use the phone, there was no email, so that really wasn't a problem. But we had a lot of restrictions of all the things we couldn't do. In addition, I only eat kosher, which means that food has to be prepared a particular way, certified a particular way, and there's a limitation on which kinds of food we can eat. Thankfully for me, Oreos actually are certified kosher, which is good because they're one of my clients. But in fact, less than 0.2 of 1% of restaurants in the United States are kosher, so it's actually quite hard to get food. And the last thing is, every single action that I take, the food I put in my mouth, every time I come out of the bathroom, we say a prayer. So every single action that I take is a reminder that there's a greater purpose of what's happening before I eat, after I eat, and it gives you greater perspective. But looking at all the folks they have out here where everybody's having a great time and enjoying the rosé, I am not partaking in that. I got to go to a supermarket up the block to the right in a 5-minute walk to go find my own bottle of rosé, and I ain't carrying that around me on the crescent. It's not gonna look so good. Now, it's not like I didn't know what the world was around me. So a lot of people that grow up in that sea of sameness or a very confined environment, they don't have exposure to the world around them. I actually had plenty of exposure. I read the New York Times every morning. I knew about Saturday morning cartoons. I just couldn't watch them. I knew about it, but I didn't engage in it because it really wasn't part of my upbringing. It was more like I was living in a glass bubble. I knew what was going on outside. I just wasn't going to venture there. People told me at a young age that we were born in God's image. And there's something very meaningful about that. But for me, the image literally was a mold, and I had to fit in that mold. And that's kind of how I led my life. I went to private school, so I stayed in my sea of sameness. I went to a public college, met a couple of people that didn't look like me, didn't hang out with them, kept to my own, kept my blinders on. My first real job out of college, I went to go work for somebody who was as religious as I was so that I didn't have all of the vulnerabilities as issues for me. So I really did stay in my own environment. And then at the age of 29, married with 2 kids, because that was also part of the deal, got to hustle, not getting any younger, which is what my grandmother said when I was 19. No joke. And so at that point, I kind of reached my limits of staying within the bubble. I had experienced some professional success. I was really proud, and I wanted more. I was curious for more. And I said to myself, how am I going to get out of this? And so I started my own firm, which led me very quickly to taking on 360i as one of my clients, and very shortly thereafter joined 360i to start their social marketing practice, and joined them full-time about 12 years ago. So at the age of 29 was the first time I had an intellectual conversation with somebody who was not just like me. It's kind of bizarre in a world where we have to really understand and put ourselves in our consumer shoes, right? I wasn't only not in my consumer shoes, I wasn't in the industry shoes. I was completely outside of the loop. Well, being an outsider meant a lot more than just having a little bit of culture shock. There were so many things that I couldn't do that I was a bit of an outsider in both of my worlds. I was an outsider in my home because many women didn't work outside of the home. And I was an outsider at work because I couldn't eat with everyone. I would leave them on Saturdays. It was just kind of feeling not anywhere and a little bit unstable. And just to kind of top it off, when you try to get yourself into a situation like this, so this was me in New Orleans with a bunch of clients last month. We were at like one of these really nice restaurants, Tableau in New Orleans, if you ever try it. Supposedly it's fantastic. I wouldn't know, didn't eat there. But you'll see that I always have to bring my own food with me, and it looks terribly awkward. And everybody's out and enjoying, and I'm creating a sense of distance. So this could be a big liability, to the point that actually people at work, and I know they didn't mean to make fun of me, but they would say on Fridays, when are you turning into a pumpkin? Which was there. There was this moment where sundown would happen on Friday, and boom, I'd be offline and you couldn't reach me. The company could be going under, client could be firing you, client could be hiring you. You're not getting the call because you ain't answering it. And so I would do what I could to overcompensate for it and make things better, but ultimately I felt riddled with guilt, which I guess goes with the Jewish territory also. Now, so the religion kind of sits on its own. Then we've got another perceived liability, which is being a mom. And there are so many conversations that are going on this week, and God bless, about gender equality and all that stuff, and obviously all for it. But you've probably been gender equality'd out if you've been in the Palais. But being a mom is a little bit of a separate challenge in and of itself. I've got 2 kids, thank God they're teenagers now. Actually, let's scratch that, teenagers are hard. But of the top 30 ad agencies in the United States, only 2 are run by women, which is it was surprising to me, I gotta tell you. But it does put yourself in an unfortunate position where you're always you've got a foot in kind of everywhere and you wish you were an octopus. Last vulnerability, this is my first job at an agency. So I don't come with a million contacts and so many different agencies. I don't know all the different nomenclature of all the different ways that things were done back in the day. And so I've got no prior experience. I mean, I've been at 360i 12 years and somehow I got invited up here, so I probably know what I'm doing, but this was my first agency job. So let's get this straight. Running an international advertising agency, unable to properly entertain clients. I can't even consume so many of their products because I even work on Oscar Mayer bacon. So how the hell did I end up here? And so I think when you kind of look at that whole idea, the big question becomes, are your liabilities really liabilities? And so my religion, my gender, my experience level, are they truly liabilities or are they assets? And I think the reason I'm up here is to tell you that they're assets. And I'll start with the first one, which would be Shabbat, the time from Friday night until Saturday night where I'm completely offline. I told you all the things I can't do. And so I can't use email, I can't drive, I can't use the phone, can't watch TV, I can't Netflix and chill. But I gotta tell you guys, as a kid, I hated it. It sucked. I was missing out on so much. I couldn't join my local Little League team and play softball with all the other kids, but now it's all about the things I can do. How many of you have taken a nap on a Saturday afternoon? I don't see too many hands up. I see 5 or 6, God bless you. But I take a nap every Saturday afternoon, and that's after having a big, nice, enjoyable meal with my children where I can enjoy life, enjoy my friends, remind myself why I'm coming to work every day. That 25 hours is the #1 reason I have not burnt out. We play board games. In fact, I could tell you probably the rent on every Monopoly property there is out there because I played Monopoly so much. And I could kick your ass in Words with Friends because I play Scrabble so much. But Sabbath for me is the most refreshing opportunity that I have to do what I need to do and still stay committed to my work. The second is eating. So we have a lot of challenges with the food situation where I can't go to nice restaurants with people. There we go. One of the fabulous perks about being in this business is entertainment. If you're in the agency business, you're constantly entertaining clients. If you're in the client business, you're constantly getting entertained by agencies and vendors and partners. You walk around here, every restaurant is full. I cannot partake in this. So a few years ago, I was invited last minute to a dinner with the chief marketing officer of Enterprise Car Rental. And it was in Manhattan. And the restaurant had already been confirmed. It was in Budokan, a very nice restaurant in New York City, not kosher, shockingly. And the CMO asked me, we got there and he noticed that my plate was empty and he says, "Why aren't you eating, Sarah?" And I said, "Well, I only eat kosher." Well, it turns out he was responsible for the certification of Cheerios so that they would be kosher. So he knew the whole deal and I didn't have to go through the 20-minute litany of all the things I can't do. And he said, "That is amazing that you do that and that's great, but you must be very hungry," which I was, because I like eating. And he said, well, the next time you come to St. Louis, which where he was from, I will take you out for a delicious kosher meal. And I know probably every kosher restaurant, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere. And I said, there is no such thing as a nice kosher meal in St. Louis. He's like, no, I'll find one, we'll go, it'll be great. So what happens, a few months later, I actually had to be in St. Louis. I go and I didn't want to tell him I was going because I didn't really want to be in that awkward situation. And so he hears that I'm going, and he sends me this email. He's so excited that I'm coming. He says, I'm going to talk to my rabbi friend, and he's going to tell me where to go. Great, God bless. So then what happens? He tells me, we're going to drive. It's only 40 minutes away. Well, it'll be an adventure. It'll be great. So we literally drive 40 minutes in the car with his PR person, and he's so excited he's going to have a kosher meal. Like, the expectation level was completely misaligned. And I said, okay. And I had a kashi bar just in case in my bag. And then we get there, and this was the special of the day. And okay, so if you're laughing, you understand shrimp is not kosher. And I said, I can't imagine that this restaurant is going to have anything for me. But the problem was, he dropped us off. He went to go park the car. And I said to the PR person, I'm like, listen, Christy, here's the deal. I can't eat here if that's what the special of the day is. And she said, let's go in. Maybe it's fake shrimp. I don't see no fake here, but okay, we'll go in. We go in, and literally they said everything they prepared was prepared with bacon. Like, oh God, I can't win here. I said, you know what, I'm fine. We'll sit down. I'll have my kashi bar. She calls up Pat, his name is, she says, Pat, get the car. We're out of here. Anyway, what happens? We get back in the car, and then they drive another 40 minutes to another location. And I'm like, oh God, I really hope this place is kosher. But his Midwestern hospitality made him feel like, and we're in the car, and we're schmoozing, we're having a good time, we're talking about different things, it's great. Then we end up at this like dilapidated structure, which indeed happened to be kosher, just not particularly great. And I acknowledged him, yes, this is indeed kosher, this is not fine dining. And he was so excited to have the authenticity and the experience of dining like this. It was an adventure for him, and it was memorable. And so instead of feeling like the outcast, I felt so much love, and I felt like we had really bonded. And to this day, we're still clients. And we were just on the phone a few weeks ago. He's like, remember that trip we took all over St. Louis? I'm like, yeah, I remember that trip. That was delicious. But you know, it kind of goes, it's a double-edged sword. And I've been all over the world finding kosher restaurants in the most unique of places. In fact, I was here in the Palais a few years ago when we won our first Gold Lion. We were so excited. And instead of like sticking around to enjoy it, we had to run to the kosher restaurant because it was about to close, because it closes at 10. I don't understand how it closes before the sun sets, but we went there. Anyway, so that's us with our kosher Merlot. And that guy was the waiter, the maitre d', and also the chef. And literally, I went there for dinner last night. The guy's still there. It's pretty impressive. But you can really see the opportunity there to create memorable experiences. So that's a different liability. So we talked about religion being an issue. And then the other issue really is the idea of not being at an agency before 360i. But I will say that lack of legacy is an asset, completely unencumbered by old structures. And so being an outsider in this industry, you look at people differently. You look for different attributes and behaviors, and you're not hiring people that look just like everybody else. We hired a bunch of former journalists because they know how to tell stories. And so I think that one of the best things that we can do here is ask ourselves the kinds of questions that say, if I were dropped on this planet today from Mars, and I was responsible for marketing and advertising today, would I do it the way that I'm doing it now? Would I hire the people I'm hiring now? Or would I think different about the whole thing? And that was one of the best things that I had going for me at 360i once I changed my perspective. Once I realized that this was something that didn't hold me back. There were so many people that had said to me, well, when I was at so-and-so, we did it this way. And I kept saying, well, you left so-and-so when you came here, so it can't be that bad, right? So I think that when we look at the perspective there, it really does change things. And turning your liabilities like lack of agency, experience, or religion, or other things into assets is something that we're seeing across the industry, the idea of how do we take the things that we might think would be defining us and turning them into things that help us. I think Dollar Shave Club, which, by the way, I'm previewing for our next session at 5 o'clock, will be Dollar Shave Club talking about their advertising. But they took the liability of them not being able to be in the retail store and turned it into an experience that says, actually, that's an asset. So you can get your butt kicked in a retail store, or you can order online and make it easier. So I think starting talking about this speech about perspective, but is it really about that, or is it an optical illusion? Are your liabilities really them, or can you figure out how to find it within yourself to turn them into the assets that they need to be? So maybe I've given you some interesting fodder for religion. I'm not trying to convert anybody here. I don't recommend it. But perhaps I can give you just a couple of tips or tools. So the first one is examine assumptions. Conventional wisdom is not necessarily the best wisdom. And had I been a good soldier in my enclave, in my sea of sameness, in my glass bubble, and followed all of the rules and expectations that I would have had, my opportunities to hone my curiosity would have been severely limited. And I think it's amazing when you start asking yourself some real simple questions, the sky really can be the limit. And you've got to have that desire to do it. And it starts with one simple question, which is, why can't I? On a personal note, like, why can't a woman be an observant Jew, raise a family, contribute to the community, and kick butt in the workforce? Conventional wisdom in my neck of the woods would say no. But it's doable, and more people are doing that because they're asking themselves, why can't I? Professionally, at 360i, this is something that we did. We built an agency from the ground up based on understanding consumer behavior and the changes that were happening, helping brands capitalize on change. And so when we started getting into the social media business, remember people at other agencies would say, Facebook? Why are you guys getting into Facebook? Facebook's just for college kids. And here I am at Facebook Blue. But Facebook today, who here was in any panels didn't hear about Facebook? I mean, but just 10 years ago, people were laughing at us because we thought that social media was going to be the way consumers were able to take control of brands and perceptions. So for us, you have to ask yourself, why can't I? So for me, a lot of that fire in the belly, the whole idea of why can't I, really actually came full circle to Celia Weiss and Saul. So that's Celia, that's my grandma. She learned how to take a selfie. So that's why her face is the biggest, even though she is by far the most diminutive. And they have this amazing story, survived Auschwitz, came to America. My grandfather actually, he bartered cigarettes for salami, got himself put in an Italian prison, broke out of the Italian prison, hitchhiked his way to Paris, and eventually got passage to America, just so that he could be here. Well, not here, because we're in France, but be in America. And once he got here, he was so excited to be free after all of the pain he had been through in losing his family. He went to go get a job. Nobody would give him a job because he had to work on Saturday. And he didn't give up on his faith. He said, why can't I? And he created a startup in the early 1950s. It was in a small insurance brokerage. To this day, thriving. My father works there, my brother works there, my uncle works there, my cousin works there. It's a beautiful family business. Notice how I just said a bunch of men are working there. So much for me. But my grandparents persevered, and they asked, why can't I? And that is why they're here today. And frankly, it's why I'm here today. And so examining assumptions allows you to be able to think well beyond what your potential could be. The second is different is memorable. We all have things about us that we might not be thrilled about. okay? That experience in St. Louis, in certain cases, might have been the most mortifying experience. And originally, as we were going from restaurant A to restaurant B, it certainly did feel mortifying at the time. But it built up something incredibly special that makes you different in a way that lets you stand out. And if you embrace it and you put the right attitude on it, it really can help you. And I'm not saying I want to be known because I'm the crazy person with the crazy food. That's not where I'm going here. But that you stay true to your values, I'd be cool with that. Who here wouldn't be cool with saying they're known for staying true to their values? So the one thing that you have to do, though, in order to do that is allow yourself to be vulnerable. And it's a great mechanism for conversation and developing relationships and the like. But you have to be comfortable taking that first step and demonstrating that you're willing to be vulnerable before you can expect somebody to be the same way back to you. The last is balancing chutzpah with respect. Now, I understand this is an international audience, so chutzpah might not be the most obvious word, but I'll give you Webster's explanation is audacity. And so, as with much of this speech, it's all about perspective. Audacity could be good, it could be bad. But for me, I'm trying to strive for that good kind of audacity, the one that's delivered with respect and the most generous interpretation. Can't be afraid to speak up. In this industry, nobody wins by being a yes man or woman. In this industry, nobody's winning lions, just a few meters away by being a yes man. You have to question. You have to ask. You got to raise your voice. And so I think we have to get ourselves comfortable being uncomfortable so that we can ask those questions. So I'll give you a real world experience. So I mentioned earlier that Oreo was one of our clients. And when we first won the Oreo business, we were very excited, obviously an iconic cookie, globally relevant. It was about to reach 100 years. We were very excited. And when we won the business, we were told moms ages 6 to 12 were our target, and those were the people we needed to talk to. Because moms and dads would get home and they would talk to their kids after a long day at work. They would enjoy an Oreo and milk moment. It was very special, very emotional. And that was our target. And we did some great work in digital and eventually in social, where Oreo became an incredibly loved brand. And this was a few years ago, so Facebook fans it was a really big thing. And we got 25 million fans on Facebook. It was so exciting. And the clients had asked us, well, why is that exciting? They're not all moms. And so we said, well, maybe we're trying to reach more than moms. And they said, well, that might be wastage. So we said, okay, let's go to the research. And we asked the question, not in an obnoxious way, but saying, can we test out why there were fans on Facebook that were loving the brand if they're not buying the brand? And so that brings me to the very statistically significant chart that I've drawn about the life cycle of an Oreo cookie eater. So here's the story built on years of research. You are a baby. You do not eat an Oreo cookie. It's a bad idea. You're a baby. Then you become not a baby. Call it anywhere between 4 and 6 years old. You get your first Oreo cookie. It is a memorable experience. Research has proven that. You eat that. You love that. You eat it a long time, and a lot of them, until you get to middle school, become a teenager, and then Oreos might not be so cool for you. And then you stop eating Oreo cookies, and you move over to the sweeter, savory Cheetos, M&Ms, whatnot. And you don't eat Oreos again until you are a parent of a child, and then you eat them in a closet. Or you eat them with your kid, twist, lick, and dunk, and it's beautiful. There's a fantastic opportunity here. But if our audience was only moms, we'd be trying to shove more cookies into more moms, or trying to encourage moms to have more kids to shove the cookies in there. That's not going to work. That's not what's going to drive equity. That's not what's going to drive sales. And so we looked at this trough right over here and said, maybe that's where our 25 million Facebook fans are. They're people that love the brand, that miss the brand. They don't want nostalgia, but they want to know that that's a brand for them. And so a few years ago, the brand took a very bold move, a chutzpah move, and said, you know what? Let's try a more contemporary approach for Oreo and see if we can reach that audience through cultural relevance and saying Oreo is a brand for me. And that led us to the Daily Twist. And one of the best things about the Daily Twist was not that we won the Cyber Grand Prix, but I have to show that picture because I am really proud. But it sold more cookies and it opened up the audience. And ultimately, by not just saying, okay, we're only going to go for moms, but broadening up that opportunity and not just being a yes man, you're able respectfully to question, to ask, to challenge thinking and see where you can get. So, to sum up, there we go. 3 thoughts. 1, examine assumptions. Challenge convention. Think differently. Think, why can't I? The second, different is memorable. What is it that you have that makes you special that you might think is not so cool, but if you own it, it could actually be pretty awesome. And the third, balance some chutzpah with respect. And so all of this is about perspective. So the question I ask of you is your glass half full or half empty? You decide. Thank you.
That was absolutely amazing, by the way. So we have got the questions that are coming up to the screen, so I'm going to get you to stay here, Sarah, if that's all right.
Sure.
And you can keep submitting questions as we're going through and upvote or up down any of these votes. So, did your community accept you branching out and starting your own firm?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Originally, no. Originally, there was a question of why are you even going to work? But the best thing that ended up happening to me was the best PR I ever got in my neighborhood was in my local free newspaper. So it didn't matter if you were written up in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Ad Age, Creativity, that nobody reads in my neighborhood. But the local paper distributed in the supermarket, that was gold. And so people are like, oh, you have a real job? You do real things? And then all of a sudden I went from, oh, this poor woman, she has to work, it's so terrible, to, wow, you know, she's making an impact. And that was fantastic. And to this day, my grandmother, Celia, still keeps a copy of that free newspaper on her coffee table, which is hilarious just because I think it's circulation 500. I mean, it's just so small.
And what advice would you have for people who are outsiders to find environments accepting for their differences?
I go back to the whole idea of being vulnerable. And it can hurt. It can hurt, and like as with any relationship, if you're trying to establish a relationship with somebody, I'll tell you, I was at a cocktail party last night, as I guess we do, and I wasn't eating, so I had to talk. And there was a guy who I was talking with, and he says to me, why aren't you eating? And I said, well, I can't, and this is the deal, and whatever. And he said, well, how do you feel about it? And I started talking about, like, the speech. And then he says to me, you know, I was an alcoholic. What? But once you start showing where you are, and by the way, it was a really meaningful conversation, which is a lot better than when'd you get in, where are you staying, what sessions did you go to? Like, they're not meaningful, these conversations, but when you really get to know somebody on a personal level, it does. So it's not necessarily about finding people that are just like you. It's about people who accept you for the differences that you have, people that will embrace you. And so I think just showing that vulnerability allows other people to do that. It's a risk, it is. But I will say, I didn't open up about myself until I was working in outside of this. So 29 started actually integrating with the rest of the world. But it wasn't until I was like 33, 34, till I had like my comfort level coming out and telling people about it. So it's not like I woke up one morning and like, hey, I'm different, yay. I was nervous. I had a lot of anxiety about that. But once I did, it was so liberating.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing. As I said earlier, I am dyslexic, so I'm going to own up to my vulnerability. So if I don't read any of these correctly, but I actually put on my email signature, delightfully dyslexic, excuse typos, and it just forgives all sins.
That's fantastic. We should all do that.
I love this question. Where's the kosher restaurant in Cannes?
That's a great question. So actually, there's it closes at 10, so you better hustle. But it's called Côte Creuset, and it's right behind the Martinez if you walk up a couple of blocks.
Okay, amazing. Are you going there tonight?
I got no other choice.
Did you want to venture out of the glass bubble at any point?
A lot of my friends ventured out of the glass bubble as teenagers. That was our rebellion. So some people, like, they lose their virginity, they drink, they do other things. My friends went to the local diner, they went to the Taco Bell. I like Taco Bell as a brand, I just can't eat it. But they did venture out, and some came back and some didn't. I will say, so I have 2 kids that I also raise in similar ways to the way that I was raised. So they go to a Jewish school, and they are, and they live in an environment that allows them to be kosher and walk to synagogue and all that other stuff. But one thing that I've done differently is expose them a lot more outside. We travel a lot. We get to know a lot of people. We have friends that are not Jewish. It's just crazy in my neighborhood. But for us, it's very, very important. And my daughter is going to university next year. That's what excites her. It excites her to take a lot of the practical applications of things that she's learned over the years and start integrating in a way that keeps her values, but also allows her to learn more about others. And and honing her curiosity really excites me.
Oh, that's amazing. What actions could you have been taken by your colleagues to make you feel more comfortable?
They didn't do anything wrong. It was totally on me. Like, really, it was totally on me. They were sweet. They even said, oh, when are you turning into a pumpkin? And it was not meant in a bullying way or anything like that. It was just making light of an uncomfortable situation. I don't think my colleagues did anything wrong. In fact, they were fantastic about trying to accommodate. It's just tough. But they were absolutely fantastic and continue to be really, really cool. It's easier when you're the boss, but when I wasn't the boss, they were still cool then too.
Okay, amazing. Do you think your background is your greatest asset?
I think my smile is my greatest I don't know that it's necessarily my greatest asset. I don't know. That's very intense. I need therapy. But I think that my background everybody's background shapes who they are. That's why people go to therapy, right? But I think my background helps shape things in a way that I can assure you my parents did not have in mind at all.
So you said your colleagues were really accommodating, which is absolutely amazing, but obviously not all work environments are like that.
Yes.
So what, if there's any actionable tips that people could take away for their work environments, what could people do to make it more accommodating?
Well, the one thing was, just because I had a challenge where I couldn't work, the biggest challenge is the not working Friday night to Saturday night. And if any of you are in an agency, new business, things come up, you're working Saturday, it happens. The issue is, how do you make up for it? So you can't just say, oh, sorry, I can't do it, sucks for you. But rather you say, okay, here's how I'm going to help. Here's how I'm going to work around it. Here's how I can make myself available. So I have to be overly accommodating to adjust for that, which I believe is necessary. I'm working 1 day less than everybody else in theory. So I think you can't just say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. You say, I'm dyslexic, so are you not going to try to read it? No, you're going to try to read it. Good for you. But if you are not willing to step up and say, here's how I'm willing to overcompensate for the challenge, or I'm willing to go to this non-kosher restaurant, I realize I will not be eating, or I realize I might have to bring in those weird boxes, that's my choice. But I'm not going to say, well, if you don't go here, we're not going out. I certainly would be out of a job if that were the case.
And is the St. Louis man still a client?
He is. Oh. He is.
And how do you see your experiences changing the way your children view their glass bubble? I mean, obviously you're talking about, your daughter going to university now, but do you see other changes?
It's interesting. So my husband and son, every summer, they take a trip around the United States. They take a road trip around the United States. And I think that has been one of the better experiences for them to get out of the glass bubble, because they've been to all 50 states, which I don't know too many people can do it. And certainly my son will be 16 in August, and he's been to all 50 states before turning 16, which is an amazing opportunity. But the more exposure you get to people that are not like you, the more you are outside of the glass bubble by that virtue. So I think the issue that I have with them is to make sure that as they grow up, they stay true to the religion and to the values that are important to them, that are important to me. What they choose to do as they become adults, I'm reconciling in my own head. But I think it's really important for them to have that grounding, and that's why I do send them to the schools that I do, so they get that grounding. But then once they graduate, by that point, they will have had the tools so that they can achieve that balance of staying true to your values, but contributing to society. Because it's not just about what I get from that. It's what can I give, and how can I help make the world a better place? How can I contribute to the economy? Like, you don't want to live in a bubble. It's not good. It's not good for anybody.
Good advice for everyone. What advice do you have for people who are outsiders to find environments accepting to their differences?
To find environments accepting of their differences. I mean, that just goes back to the whole area of just being vulnerable. And also, I mean, it depends on the kind of environment that you're in. If you know that you're in an environment where you actually don't think you can be vulnerable, and this is a very bold statement, think about changing your job. Like, there are a lot of fantastic advertising agencies out there. There are a lot of fantastic companies in the creative space. And some are more friendly to people that are different than others. That's just the case. So the question becomes, do you feel like you have a chance and you just haven't taken that leap? Or do you think this isn't a welcoming environment? Because if it's not a welcoming environment, try to change your environment.
I absolutely agree. What most people don't know is there's a massive creative skill shortage now. So you have the opportunities. If your place isn't accommodating.
We're hiring.
If you want a job, come around the back. What in your past inspired you to break the mold?
The number one thing that inspired me to break the mold was the exposure to everything else that was out there. I mean, everything was within reach, but completely unachievable. And I just couldn't understand why I wasn't. And when I stayed at that job working for somebody who's Orthodox Jewish, the work environment was terrible. It was a terrible work environment. But I prioritized my safe environment of not having to deal with all the religious stuff with having, some really terrible bosses, some very unaccepting environments, like coming back to work after having 2 kids. They were like, you better get back. When are you coming back? When are you coming back? When are you coming back? And so here we have a slow reentry program for moms. Here we have a very healthy maternity, paternity, adoptive leave policy. So trying to learn from the things that didn't work in order to get to a better place.
So just broaden that a bit. So in terms of the slow getting people back after maternity leave, how does that work exactly in practice?
It literally is, you come in for a few weeks for 3 days a week, a few weeks for 4 days a week, and then you come back 5 days a week. And that allows you to slowly rematriculate back in, which I think, is necessary. After I had my kids, I came back after 6 weeks. I could barely sit in a chair. I mean, it was bad. And I was exhausted. I was a puddle. I was a shell of myself. And the expectations were just as high as when I left. But it's so hard. And then, you have nannies or, other kind of people helping out. I had this whole mom entourage of like, my nanny's going to come, then she's going to leave, then my mother's going to come. And I'm on a call, and somebody calls, and you just can't do it. I mean, it's hard. And it's not insurmountable, obviously. People do it all the time, and God bless. But coming back after maternity leave was like one of the worst feelings I ever had. My biggest professional regret was coming back so quickly. And I have to say, if I could help anybody else get back in the right way, a slow rematriculation helps.
And what do you do around paternity then for men?
They don't get the slow.
Yeah. Okay.
But they do get more. They do get more. So it's more time, and part of it is based on tenure, but it's very generous especially for the United States, which we've got a lot of work to do. We could talk to our president.
I think this might be the best boss ever, by the way, so really do come around. Was it as easy before you were a CEO as when you were on the rise? I.e., is it kind of easier now, being a CEO?
Well, no. And it's not easy. I'm just supposed to be up here saying it's achievable. I'd never said it was easy. No, I think it's the same. And the reason is, even if you're for an ad agency, if you're the CEO, sure, you're responsible for your team, and theoretically they work for you. But in the end, we're here to serve our clients. So I'm really more trying to figure out how to have that better relationship there. So those are challenges in and of itself. So no, I don't think it's any easier here.
And how are you better prepared to help clients capitalize on change due to your experience?
Oh, what a great question. I think that people who are adaptable, people who are agile, people who are nimble are more willing to challenge the status quo and do that. And I think one of the ways we've been able to, as an agency, help brands capitalize on change has been the willingness to see what's around the corner and help marketers get out of their glass bubble and say, you've been doing the same thing for 50 years. It's time to do something different. And that's why, I mean, it's so exciting that the guys from Dollar Shave Club are coming out here, because that's exactly what they did. They said, this is not the way to buy. There's a new way to buy. We need to think about this differently. And I think that's a big part of our job, is to help clients capitalize on change by getting them out of that bubble. And so trying to encourage more of that behavior.
That was incredible. How good is Sarah? Can you give her a massive round of applause? If you were on the Glitter phone, you can give feedback on Sarah's talk. I want everyone to give like the most amazing feedback so we can get it back and back and back and back. Also, if you want a new job, literally just scoot around that way and come see her.
Please.
But as we said, Dollar Shave Club is up next. It's going to be about 15 minutes. It's going to be an absolutely brilliant session. But Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.